Okay, now we're ready to start. All right, as we gather for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually connected, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We wish to acknowledge this land on which this SPC meeting is taking place. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Hohokam, the Akimel, Aodam, and most recently, the Salt River Pima Indian community. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Maricopa, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. So our agenda tonight, we have a few updates, and then any SPC reps, if you have any announcements, you'll have time to give those. And then we have Dr. Menzel joining us for Q&A. And then we have our theme tonight is SUSD Governing Board 101. So we are joined by the school board president, Jann-Michael Greenburg, and board vice president, Julie Cieniawski. And then our VP of advocacy, Holly Davidson, will be leading a question and answer with them. So she has questions ready for them. And then everyone can chime in on the chat if they have additional questions. So in terms of updates, so we are currently now forming our executive board nominating committee. So according to our bylaws, so this is the committee that's going to help put the slate together for our executive board election, which will be in May. The committee should have one board member and then 2 to 5 SPC representatives. And the tasks will be, so they'll track all the submissions of people applying, and they'll interview or talk with the nominees and just confirm their eligibility and make sure they understand the positions. And if they're not sure which position they're interested in, they can help them through that process, and do some recruiting of nominees if necessary. And then they'll present the slate of the nominees to the executive board, and a date for election will be picked. And then that will take place in May as well. So anyone who is planning to run for a position on the executive board cannot be a member of the nominating committee, but any other SPC representative can be. Ideally, we can have full representation from all the school communities. So the rep should have received an email on Monday with all of this information, and we will send that
Does
in
anyone
again.
want some spaghetti?
Oh, Brian, you're not muted.
Okay.
There you go. Sorry, I shouldn't have said names. So we'll send that out again on Friday as a reminder, and then the deadline to apply is on Monday. So Holly Davidson, who's leading our meeting tonight, she is the chair of the committee. So she's the one you will be reaching out to if you are interested. So that's the nominating committee. And then once that is formed, then they will send out the information for people to apply to run for the executive board. So the board has several vice president positions, as well as the president, the treasurer, and the secretary. And we have full descriptions of what all those positions are. So everyone will receive all that information, and the qualifications. Really, the qualification is you just have to be a parent or guardian in the district. So all that information will be coming out probably at the beginning of April, once they're ready to roll out with that. And then the actual board elections, the people that vote are the SPC representatives, those 2 representatives from each school. That's the voting body that picks the executive board. So lots more information to come on that. And then next month, our general meeting, we have the presidents from the Scottsdale Education Association and then the Scottsdale Support Professionals Association coming to talk to us for a little bit about the organizations, what their role is, and just telling us a little bit more about them. And then we will have a special segment to highlight some just kind of high points of the schools this year. So the VPs of representatives, Rachel and Rose, will reach out to all the reps to gather submissions of just what's, one highlight you want to talk about at your school from this school year. So we'll compile those into a presentation, and that can be a big focus of the meeting. Okay, that is it for that. So rep announcements. Are there any representatives that wanted to make an announcement about their school? Anything? Go ahead and just chime in if you do, because I can't really see much. Going once, going twice. All right, you're saving it for next month. Perfect. Okay, and then with that, we are ready for Dr. Menzel.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so we compile these in advance as we do every month, and we have not too long of a list. So if there's any other general updates that you want to chime in on, I'm sure there'll be some time at the end for you to do that. So first up, how have the first 3 days of full-time in-person learning been for secondary students and staff? How has the sub-fill rate been?
So I'll start with the last part of the question first. Our sub-fill rate for the last month has been right around 90%, sometimes up to 92 or 93%. Every now and then it's high 80s, but that's up significantly from the end of last year where we were 65 to 70% and really struggling. So our fill rate is exponentially better. So we're really grateful for that. And today I think it was 90 or 91% fill rate. The initial feedback that I've received from principals and those that have visited the sites is that things are going pretty well with the return to full day schedule. I had a chance to get over to Mojave Middle School and observe lunch in action. And the weather's been cooperative, so it's been nice to be outside. Students can spread out. They do a nice job of keeping their mask on when they're not eating, but they're also students. So maintaining physical distance is always a challenge, but the process seems to be working pretty well. And so far, I think the principals are pretty optimistic that it's going to work. They'll be more interested in some of the challenges if we get rain or when it gets much hotter.
Mm-hmm.
But they've all, I think, done a really nice job of contingency planning so that they can be ready for those eventualities.
Okay, great. Good to hear. Will the district be sharing the response rate for the voluntary virus surveillance testing? And then second part to that is, what is the justification for the cost and risks associated with having third parties come to campuses to test our children?
So we, like I did at the governing board meeting last night, can share the number of voluntary waivers that have been submitted. So as of yesterday, there were 432, which represents about 3% of the total middle school and high school parent population. And we'll be happy to share that aggregate number in the future. In terms of the surveillance testing and the rationale, this has been a topic of conversation going back to last winter. But then it resurfaced after the CDC came out with its updated guidance in mid-February. And so we've been doing our due diligence based on conversations with the governing board in terms of what the options might be for pooled testing, direct testing, and who the vendors are that might be able to provide that service. In terms of the cost, those would be covered through federal funds, either under ESSER 2 or ESSER 3. We have 9.4 million or somewhere in that ballpark that we're getting from ESSER 2 funding. So we would be able to cover those costs. We're projecting less than $100,000. Should we get sufficient parents to sign the waiver so that we can get enough tests done to make it worthwhile? The underlying rationale behind it is that as a part of a layered mitigation strategy, you're trying to identify asymptomatic cases of COVID so that you don't have spread of COVID on the campus as a result of those asymptomatic individuals. And we'll be bringing a recommendation forward to the governing board on April 6th based on what we learned from the various providers. We've had conversations with our lead nurses. They've got some opinions about how the process works. And we're going to need to look at what's the rate of spread within our community. So part of the reason for this level of surveillance monitoring is when community spread is at a higher level. It really does help us ensure that we're catching potential cases earlier so we don't have spread on our campuses. When community transmission is low, may or may not be worth the investment. And so that's something we have to look at and then bring forward to the governing board for a final decision.
And this is just happening for middle and high school, not elementary?
That's correct. As we were looking at, one, there is a significant cost. Secondly, when you look at the data, the spread of COVID amongst middle school and high school students is more like adult spread. With our younger students, it doesn't spread at the same rate and way. And so the value for the dollar is not as evident at the elementary as it is at the middle school and high school level.
Okay, great. Thank you. When will parents and students know who is recommended to attend summer school to fill learning gaps?
That's a very good question. We're working diligently every day in terms of finalizing those plans, but I would expect that sometime before the end of April, those recommendations would be coming forward so people can plan.
Okay, great. It says, Dr. Menzel, the Architects for Learning Environments will give a webinar on outdoor learning environments on March 23rd at noon. Would you or anyone from your leadership team be interested in listening?
If someone can send that information, we'll see who's available. We do support utilization of outdoor learning spaces as best we can. And we happen to live in a climate where we can do that more frequently than many other people around the country. So please forward the information and we'll see who's available to listen in.
Okay, great. Yeah, we don't have names affiliated with these, so hopefully they're listening and know to do that. As a parent community, we see that new schools are benefiting from upgrades in classrooms. When can the older schools expect their equipment to be upgraded, such as smart boards, microphones, amplifiers, etc.? Is there a calendar or plan in place to address this?
I appreciate that question. We are in the process of finalizing a 2-year technology refresh. And so that hasn't been brought forward for approval yet, but it's in the works. And in terms of what's happening in individual classrooms, if there's technology that's not working, there's a process to submit a request and we can bring in replacement equipment. But then the goal is to have a regular refresh cycle for smart boards. Actually, we're not even doing smart boards anymore. When we do the replacement, we're using the touchscreen. I'm trying to remember what's the technical name for the TV monitors, but if you, it's just like your iPad, but 75 inches. And so it allows, you don't have to have a projector any longer because you can, from your computer, project on that screen, as well as use it as a touch screen for some of the amazing apps that are available. So we're replacing the old school whiteboards with those devices. And over the next 2 years, we're planning on doing a pretty significant refresh there.
Okay, great. And then the last question, when allocating grant money that's available to fund social emotional support for schools through Jewish Family Services, why are the services being provided for the K-5 schools, but not for the K-8 schools where Jewish Family Services are needed as well?
That is a question I'm not prepared to answer. I would need to follow up with Shannon Cron to get that answer. And so we can get back with you, but I do not know if there's a specific reason why, if it's lack of funding or how that decision is made.
Okay, great. And that is it. Did you have anything else you wanted to share while you're here?
Well, first, I want to express my appreciation for the Scottsdale Parent Council and for all the support that our parents provide for the district. This is not new for Scottsdale Parent Council, but this year's been a particularly interesting year. So we're grateful for the support of our parents. And as I've mentioned at other meetings, we're now turning our attention to what's the future and how do we ensure that as a unified school district, we're prepared to tackle the challenges on a go-forward basis to move into the 21-22 school year, prepared to be successful with plans in place to address learning loss or accelerate learning for students who might have fallen behind this year, so that we're ready to hit the ground running next fall. So I'm just really grateful for the partnership with the community. It makes all the difference in the world. Schools can't do this alone. And so each one of you play a critical role in helping move our district forward. And I just want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here again.
I always appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
All right.
There's a couple quick questions in the chat. One was, are you looking for elementary school families to test also, or is this limited to middle and high school?
Yeah, that was the COVID testing question. And yeah, right now it's limited to
Yeah.
elementary school.
Okay. And then who can they send the information about the outdoor learning environment webinar?
Just
Who's
send
the
it to me.
best person to send it to?
I'll put my email address in.
Perfect, thank you.
And we'll reach out to Shannon Cron to get the answer to the Jewish Family Services question.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. And with that, we will, give me just a second here. So we have Holly Davidson, our Vice President of Advocacy, will be leading our discussion on SUSD Governing Board 101. So Holly, you can introduce our two guests tonight.
Hello, I'm Holly. We are excited to have Jann-Michael Greenburg and Julie Cieniawski with us, our President and Vice President of the SUSD Governing Board. I just have quick little introductions for each of them. Jann-Michael Greenburg was elected to the Governing Board in 2018. After graduating from Arcadia High School in 2012, he attended law school at the University of Edinburgh School of Law in Scotland, from which he graduated with honors in 2016. He then worked for Deloitte UK LLP's private equity tax team in Glasgow and Edinburgh, returned to Arizona in the summer of 2017 to work as the Vice President of Trisona Multimedia, a music copyright licensing firm. And following in his grandfather's footsteps, he began volunteering at Yavapai Elementary School in September of 2017, and now is serving on our board as the President. Currently, the term of office is 2019 to 2022. And then we have Julie Cieniawski, who is our Vice President. Term of office just started in 2021 and will go to 2024. She's been a Scottsdale resident for over 27 years. Born and raised in New Hope, Minnesota, she attended neighborhood public school and is a first-generation college graduate, receiving both her bachelor's and master's in education from the University of Minnesota. She's been an advocate for public education at the local, state, and national levels, serving on school and district committees on curriculum development, assessment and grading, teacher evaluation, restorative justice practices, middle schools, wellness, school safety, and school budgets, to name a few. She has worked on the bond and override oversight committees, served as the Scottsdale Education Association president for 3 years, and on the Arizona Education Association board of directors for 6 years. While an SUSD teacher, she received the SUSD Foundation's Quest for Excellence Award, recognizing excellence in civic leadership, and was named a Scottsdale Charles Outstanding Teacher. And she's married with 2 children, both of whom attended SUSD schools. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you being here. So really, we are wanting to learn from you, learn all about what you all do, what all is involved in this. You know, we see part of it, but we don't see a lot of the behind the scenes or know all these rules and formalities about the board. So I'm going to jump right in, and feel free to answer the questions, but also add to. And then, like Emmy said, anyone who wants to ask other questions can put them in the chat. If we can get to them, we'll do that. If we can't, we could email them afterwards. So first question is just, what is the role of the governing board?
By the way, Jann and I make a good team. We will tag team these questions however you guys feel fit. If one of us is not giving you what you need, just ask for greater clarification. You're getting the youngest and the oldest member of the governing board working together as a team. So it's pretty cool. I'm honored to be working with Jann-Michael.
And likewise for me and Julie, I think, frankly, our entire board is just a great team, and we're lucky. I believe Zach Lindsay, another board member, is watching this, and we might have a few others. I'm not sure who the remainder who might join us, but we're glad to be here, and we look forward to these questions. Julie, do you want to start us off on what the role is of the governing board?
Sure. Well, I would like everyone to keep in mind that education is universal, and it is a nonpartisan responsibility that we take on. The school governing board supports the US Constitution, the federal and judicial decisions that are made. We swear through oath of office to uphold the Arizona Constitution. We are expected to know, understand, and follow AZ revised statutes as they come up. We receive directive and direction from the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, the State Board of Education, and I see it as we are expected to oversee the best interest of our Scottsdale Unified School District students.
Yeah, I think that's right, Julie. And I think, on a more direct level, our board, our role is to provide that oversight and input to the decisions of the administration. We obviously delegate a lot of our authority to Dr. Menzel or whoever our superintendent might have been in the past. And we're very lucky to have Dr. Menzel with us. I personally think that he's a great leader and one who's going to bring our district into the 21st century and beyond. But we give him a lot of that authority of oversight to make hiring and firing decisions, which we will discuss in a bit, organizational structural changes, what programs we'll be teaching in our schools, the relationship with third-party organizations like the SPC. We give that to him and we allow him to make recommendations to us that we can review, question, see if it's really the right fit and question whether it is the right direction for our district. And we go from there. So our role is very supervisory. It's no different in many ways from your average board of directors of a company. We question, we meet with him individually, we meet with him as a group during our board meetings, and we discuss some of these hard questions and make sure that we're really capturing the issues that matter to our constituents, to our students, to our staff, and hopefully make our district a better place.
Well said.
Thank you.
Perfect. So who serves on the governing board?
Governing board members are either elected by the populace or they're appointed by the county superintendent of public instruction.
And could you just let us know our current board members? I think probably most people know, but.
Yeah, so you have Julie and myself, but we also have Zach Lindsay, Patty Beckman, and Dr. Libby Hart-Wells. And as I said before, and Julie said this at the outset, I think we're a really great team. Lots of experience. Each member brings something new and unique to the field. We're really fortunate to finally have a teacher on the board. It's been some time since we've had that, and that's a really great perspective to have when we're talking about educational programs, because it's not necessarily something that I, whose background is in law, has, but I can bring kind of the legal perspective. Patty and Zach really bring a lot of the financial know-how. Dr. Hart-Wells also brings the teacher perspective as well as the science background, and which is so crucial during a pandemic, as we've seen.
Absolutely, it seems like a really well-rounded group. So what are the qualification requirements of governing board members?
An individual has to live within the district boundaries and they cannot be a current employee of the district. They have to take an oath of office and ensure all of those expectations that I mentioned earlier with the legal and civic and economic and ethical responsibilities as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that covers it. You have the legal requirements. You're 18 years of age or older. You have a pulse. You collect the signatures you need. You get the votes you need, and that's your qualification to be in office. But Julie's right. There's the practical side. Understanding the legal requirements, understanding the district and know-how, being able to recognize that your role is to support the district as a whole and not necessarily, as Julie noted, partisan, political, ideological approaches, but really what do our students need? What do our staff need? to support our students in helping to get that done.
Perfect. So you mentioned getting all your signatures. If you could give us a little insight into how the election process works from kind of the start to when you finally have that election and get into your role on the board.
Jann, would you like me to go first?
Well, since you recently ran, yes.
It's actually a very extensive process. You need to file a statement of interest with the County Superintendent of Public Instruction and the state. You'll have to open a campaign bank account separate from your own personal finances. You need to file a statement of organizational structure. You do need to collect nominating petitions, and thank you for those of you who are here tonight that participated in that process for us. Currently, the requirement is 400 signatures. There has been a legislative request. I'm not sure where the bill stands, but it was requesting the change to a 10% of the qualified voter electorate. So like in our school district, it would be a very substantial number in order to run for school board. It would be well over 1,000. You have to file regular financial reports through the state system. Typically, you create a website, you fundraise. The expectation of outreach into the community through different organizations is there. It could be based on your own interests. The outreach also includes, typical campaign propaganda, mailers, signs, helping get out the vote, making sure down ballot races are actually paid attention to. So there's much more that's involved in it than I think a lot of people think. Am I missing anything, Jann, that you can think of?
No, I think that, that covers it. I mean, again, there's a legal side of it, right? Filing your statement of interest, collecting your signatures and submitting those, filing your statement of organization if you're accepting donations over $1,200 and paying for things and or having expenses of $1,200 or more, filing your quarterly reports, which is a big one, time consuming, even if there is not much to report. And then you have the practical side, the typical politics involved, door knocking, canvassing, speaking to voters, attending election day polls and handing out brochures, building up support. It's time consuming. It's definitely, if you're interested in running, I would not recommend doing what I did, which is beginning your campaign in March, because that means you are collecting signatures in June and July. It is not fun to go and collect signatures when it's 110 out. But yeah, it's a really, really, really robust process, but it's definitely a great learning experience.
Mm-hmm. And there are some great organizations that can train candidates and help you throughout the process too. There are many organizations that can help you along the way too. So it's good to develop a good solid core of individuals. My kitchen cabinet is what we refer to it as, was a close set of very diverse individuals, and that was intentional. So it wasn't going to be the same responses to questions and making decisions on how to do things. I think it's important to have a variety of perspectives and not just your best friend who's always going to tell you what you think, what they think you want to hear. So I think that's really important, is to make sure you're getting a variety of input if you do decide to run for office.
Well, we appreciate that. We know it was an extensive process, and excited that you were able to make it through it all and end up on our board. And speaking of that, So once you do get elected and you're new to the governing board, what is the orientation process? How do you learn all of these rules? It's probably, maybe easier for a lawyer who's used to all of the formality, but I can imagine that, learning all the statutes and all that can be quite the process.
My work with the AEA on the board of directors was helpful, but we followed what was called Robert's Rules, more formal rule of order, a little bit different than our school district. I've got to tell you, I will look at Jann during meetings and ask him questions like, is this the appropriate time to say this or whatever? Because yeah, you do pick up on it. But it's different. I mean, you're really having a live conversation for the first time with this group of collective individuals because of our open meeting laws. And you're doing this spread out in this big room with people there and knowing that you're live on air. So it's different than having going out and hanging out with your friends and just talking about education or whatever you're interested in. So there are rules. The Arizona School Board Association has some onboarding training, issues-based seminars, conferences, workshops dealing with equity, finance, trust. There's an Arizona Latino School Board Association. I haven't attended any of their trainings yet. I haven't seen any. And then there's also the Arizona Association of School Business Officials, and they're referred to as ASBO, not ASBA, and they do offer trainings as well. Basically, there's a lot of learning by doing, and then you cannot be afraid of asking questions. If you have questions, you have to ask. Otherwise, you sit there and you don't say anything and you don't participate. And I figure that's not why we are elected. So there is a lot to learn. I really appreciate you asking that, Holly. A lot to learn in being a governing board member, and still a lot more to learn as well. Jann-Michael's probably gone through more trainings throughout his experience, so maybe he can add to that.
Yeah, I would say that the most important training I ever took, and it's worthwhile, even if you aren't interested in running for the school board, but are just interested in understanding the finances that districts deal with and how the budgeting process works, was ASBO's, the Arizona School Business Officials training on finance. Because, as was noted in my little brief bio, I've done accounting work through Deloitte in the UK, and accounting work that we're all used to, whether it's our household finances, budgeting our pocketbooks, or for companies, what have you, is very different than government budgeting. And how we get our funding, the different weights that are afforded to students. We always talk about how many students we have, and we say, well, we have about 22,000 students. But in the budgeting world, we're talking about weighted student averages. So we're talking about 28,000 students, and understanding what that means, understanding our cash accounts, understanding what the different documents that we're reviewing and approving. That's probably one of the most difficult things to really learn. And those are really useful classes if you're interested in understanding finance generally and what those changes at the state legislature level mean for our bottom lines, because you can kind of figure it out on your own once you take those classes. But beyond that, I think, Julia commented earlier, I think it's in a way sink or swim, right? We don't have staff. We're not Congress. We don't have our own personal paralegals and secretaries who are working with us individually to prepare questions for meetings and identifying those areas. We get comments or criticism, if you will, constructive criticism about, oh, you should have prepared a speech beforehand, or you should have written out all these questions. Well, that's really difficult to do because, most of us have other obligations in our lives, whether that's work or other volunteering activities and what have you. We don't have a staff. We have a lot of documents to get through. We rely and should rely on the trust and hard work of our administration and staff who do a great job every day. But things will come up at meetings. New questions crop up, new issues crop up. Sometimes we have to go back to the drawing board. So when you see the board meeting, you're watching it, it's important to remember that outside of the government world, this would all be happening behind closed doors. These aren't discussions you'd be seeing live. And so in a way, it's kind of watching how the sausage gets made. It's not necessarily a pretty picture. We try to keep a pretty good rules and orders and regulation to the conduct of the meeting. But insofar as the content and whether somebody understands a certain point or needs to learn something, or you see, oh gosh, how come this board member knows this, but this other board member doesn't? It's just the natural process. It's not that any board members don't care or weren't paying attention. It's just a big organization, $200 million plus each year. We have a lot of different things, a lot of different interests as board members. And, we learn in different areas and our expertise grows in different areas. So it's sink or swim, but everyone's there to support you. So no one's ever going to sink. If you're on the board, you're going to swim and hopefully do a great job.
It's nice to hear a little bit about, what's involved outside of what we see. And I'm just curious, in general, how much time do you think you spend per week or per month in this voluntary elected position?
Well, it really does ebb and flow. I think to do it well, it requires a lot of time. For me, I retired from teaching to run for this position. And I feel like my day is as full, if not more full, than it was as a full-time teacher. There is a lot to learn. So, I do think, Holly, you could go about it and just, be okay as a governing board member, as one of 5 if you weren't able to put in a whole lot of time. But that's not what I want to be. I don't ever want to do something and just be okay at it. So it does take a lot of time. Jann commented on the document reviews and contracts. One contract we looked at first glance, it had like 94 pages. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not reading every word of 94 pages. Back and looking and seeing the end, there was a lot of like kind of open pages. So you just kind of start learning how to skim important documents, looking for dates and numbers and expectations and things like that. Asking a lot of clarifying questions behind the scenes is really important to be able to come to a board meeting and make a decision that you feel is the best decision for you to make at that time. It does take a lot of time, and it takes a lot of asking and seeking information from other individuals as well. So here's the tricky part, because we have open meeting laws in the state of Arizona. We can't have, typically we can't have more than 2 governing board members discussing the same topics at the same time without there being a public notice. So let's just say that Libby and Zach and I, as new governing board members, wanted to get together and discuss budgets. Well, because once we took that oath of office, we could no longer do that together as a group of new governing board members. So we had to, we have to do things a little bit differently, and you kind of have to really figure out on your own what you know and what you don't know and what you think you need to know in order to make those decisions. And I don't imagine, like, I know Jann works really hard. He's got a full-time job. And so I can't imagine that it's going to become less time intensive over time. I think, the object just changes, your topic just changes. Go ahead, Jann. You can add to that too at the time.
Yeah, I would say, these aren't supposed to be full-time jobs. Again, it's like the board of directors in another setting. It's really about providing that oversight. The problem is, we work on such a local level that we deal with issues that other types of organizations don't deal with. One of the most common ones is input from our community, emails from our community. COVID certainly stressed the system quite a bit. I think at one point in, I want to say August or September, I had responded to about 200 plus emails individually. Some of them were copy and paste jobs, but a lot of them had a little bit of a different question posed. And so I tried to answer them as best I could and as many as I could. It's very difficult to do. In fact, I think Dr. Menzel should be given props. I think if you are familiar with the Let's Talk dialogue system, he has responded to over 3,000. Is that right, Julie? Over
Yes,
3,000 Let's Talk dialogues personally. And those are because, those get farmed out to the relevant departments. There are just a lot during COVID that really the superintendent had to take charge of. We do need to work on our communication. I think that's a common concern among our community and our stakeholders. But insofar as the individual level of communication that's provided when people respond to us or ask us questions, I would say it's probably pretty high. You're generally going to get a response there. So that's pretty time consuming. But in addition to that, urgent issues that have come up, we also have our own individual board member priorities, the things that we care about that either we campaigned on or that we've taken up since coming into office. As you all know, auditing was a really big part of mine. Financial transparency, making sure the money really is going to our kids and we're finding savings. That's a big project. That was, I was helped by previous board members, and so, it has been, I would say that probably about 50% of my time I've had to divert from, my private work to this in probably the past 7 months or so. But things are starting to calm down. We're starting to move back into a normal rotation, as Julie said. And I think the amount of time spent on direct board work will balance out again. We're not micromanagers. Again, we trust Dr. Menzel to carry out the functions of the day-to-day operations of the board. We might have questions that come up, but we're not really there to tell him how to do his job or how other people should do their job. We wait and see what the results are of their actions. And I know Julie has visited all the school campuses. I still need to finish my tours. They've been sidetracked with private work so far, but that's an important part too, visiting our campuses, meeting with our teachers and our principals, seeing what it's like on the ground. We spend time doing that. We attend various functions virtually or in person. So there's a lot that comes along with it, but it's definitely enjoyable and worthwhile, especially when we get to see our students and the projects they're doing, whether it's a STEM night or a teen town hall or any of their theater performance, musical performances. It's always great to see that.
Agree. Yes.
So you touched on a lot of things that I think I have some follow-up questions. As far as the kind of more the formality of the board, can you explain to us one kind of the difference between a public meeting versus a closed door meeting when you have the public versus the other?
Sure.
And any other meetings that we're unaware of, or they all fun?
Yes. So in terms of open meetings law, where there are 3 or more board members present to discuss a matter, those are almost always going to be public meetings. We have the regularly scheduled special meeting, and then 2 weeks later, we have the regular meeting where we take public comments. But there are a few set reasons why we are allowed to have a closed door meeting. The 2 main ones, or 3 main ones that are utilized, are to receive legal advice. Receiving legal advice obviously needs to remain confidential so as not to waive your attorney-client privilege. So that is and these are all statute-based. This is all set by Arizona state law. So that is one of the main reasons we will meet. Another new reason that we're probably going to be meeting in a little bit here is for security, to discuss our security and emergency plans. It used to be that those had to be discussed or were available to the public for inspection. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense if the idea is how do you keep a campus secure from bad actors, or what do you do in case of an emergency? So that's another one that will probably be coming up. And the one that we just had on Tuesday, again, these are the top 3 reasons, to review a specific staff member to discuss their performance and any issues related to that. We do sometimes have in disciplinary matters, a student will appeal the discipline that's been issued to them, and that appeal process goes to the governing board. In those cases, the student again has the option to have that in executive session or in public. We have had a student, I believe, do it in a public session before. It's rare, but it will usually be done in private as well.
And Holly, to expand upon that, that state statute requires us to keep that information confidential. And there's a fine of up to $2,500 for violating that confidentiality requirement. So it's important that we do not discuss what goes on in executive session with anyone else outside of executive session.
Yeah, there are, it is strict enough that there are even executive sessions where, for example, the superintendent might not be present. And we as board members can discuss between ourselves. We could not even disclose to him unless it was necessary for some further action that came out of the executive session. We couldn't even discuss it with him. So we try not to use them because they're not they prevent a certain level of transparency. They also make it more difficult to conduct further actions at times. But there are times when we absolutely must use them, and that's why they come up. Outside of open meeting law, we do have other meetings that don't need to follow open meeting law, where there are less than 3 board members present. So there are certain meetings like our committee meetings. We have a finance and facilities committee. There are 2 board members on that. We have the marketing committee and communications. We have the policy committee, diversity, equity, inclusion steering committee. Those are committees where there are board members.
Plan.
Oh, and strategic planning committee. Yeah. Those are meetings where there are 2 board members present, not a quorum. And so those might occur and the public might not know about them or have access to them to watch. Julie and I also meet with Dr. Menzel every couple weeks and our legal counsel to discuss the upcoming agenda, any issues or questions we might have, and changes we might want to make. So there are additional meetings that occur, but they don't need to be noticed and posted because there's less than a quorum present.
Right.
So that's really helpful for all of us to hear. I think, we see you in the meetings, but we're not always exactly sure. And it kind of made me giggle, the part about, having security meetings public. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So it's probably good that changed. Right. Another question is just, how does the public comment process work? How do parents and community members use the public comment system?
Well, public comments are pretty straightforward. We, by law, are not required to have them at all. But of course, that is, I would personally say bad policy. We want to have our public be able to comment during our meetings. So during our regular board meetings, we invite public comments. All you need to do is, before the public comment set begins, fill out one of the blue or white comment cards at the entrance of the meeting room. Fill it out and you provide it to our board secretary, who is wonderful. And then we give each speaker 3 minutes to comment. We're actually pretty liberal in our comment policies because you can discuss any topic you want. You could, in theory, even discuss a topic completely unrelated to the district if you so desired. There aren't really many restrictions. Actually, the board, and it was a change I had pushed for, changed the restrictions because I believe they were unconstitutional at the time. So you can go up there and criticize us all day long if that's what you want to do. And we currently have 2 separate sections for public comments. We have one at the beginning of the meeting and then a later section where you could comment only on the items that are on the agenda. We're likely going to remove that just because no one ever uses it. So we're just going to have the public comment section at the beginning of the meeting. This is good. Our meetings are now starting at 6 for the time being. So if you have work or other commitments, you can pop by make your public comment probably by about 6:30, 6:45, and then leave the meeting if you need to. And hopefully it doesn't affect your work or having to leave work early or having to tend to your kids, whatever obligations you might have. Julie, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I do, because I think it's interesting that when I used to attend governing board member meetings as a citizen and as a staff member, I used to wonder, well, why don't they say anything back to us after we said stuff? And it's actually not a good practice to engage, because if it's not on the agenda, it's not considered appropriate to actually have a discussion. Is coming in and talking about something that's not on our agenda, we're supposed to just listen to them and reserve any deliberation, discussion, or action for later, if it's appropriate, to consider at another time. So that's the hard part. You just have to sit and listen, and you can't engage and interact.
Yeah, there are limited circumstances where we can respond, and it's we're, at the very end, we're allowed to respond to direct criticism. We're allowed to refer the matter for additional review. And gosh, there's one other. We can ask somebody to answer a question. If a specific question was posed, somebody can be directed to answer it if appropriate. But so far in my time on the board, as board president, I've only used that one time the other night due to a specific allegation that we didn't take public comment at a meeting, which we did do. But as Julie's right, it's really bad practice, because the last thing you want is you give some big reply to some criticism, and then all of a sudden there's a fight in the room and people are shouting. It's not productive, for the meeting.
Well, and that is helpful for, all of us to know too. You're not being rude. You're not just trying to respond. It makes a lot of sense that, you allow the public comment, but then not to comment back.
And I didn't know that, Holly. I didn't know
Right.
that before. So I was like, oh, that's why they're always quiet after people talk. So it's interesting.
That makes sense. You touched on this a little bit, but what are some of the things you're doing when you're not in your meetings? What are the things you're doing as a board member? And you mentioned this a little bit, Jann-Michael, but what are the things that are really rewarding for you? Being in this role that can be, pretty time consuming and taxing in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I've been committed to continue, and that is advocating for public education. So that means meeting with our city officials. It looks like we are going to be able to add the education component to our City of Scottsdale general plan for the first time ever. That's all about relationship building. It's about helping when they ask you to help. Even if you don't want to sit down and read documents or write on the weekend, you do it. It means reaching out to our legislators, looking out for what are considered to be bad bills that would financially or constrain the ability for public education to really be a good place. And so I continue with that. I also try to stay really connected within my own personal interests and organizations in our city and in our state. Scottsdale Roundtable, formerly Scottsdale 2020, it's part of the Scott Project. I enjoy listening to those conversations and participating in those. Stand Indivisible, AAUW, the League of Women Voters, Arizona Jewish Women's Council, One Community. So that communication with the public is really important, I think, because if you're understanding what the diversity in your community, whether it's our city or our state or our nation, what's going on, you're better able then to make decisions to meet the needs of our students. So I choose to stay really involved in my interest in advocating for public education. let's see, Jan mentioned some of the smaller meetings that we have, like the other day, board member Beckman and myself met with Mr. Rayler, and we got an update on all of the facility updates and proposals that are going on. So we do what's called 2x2x1 meetings, that format. So we're not violating open meeting laws. We meet with Dr. Menzel one-on-one on a monthly basis as well, just to kind of touch base and see what's going on. It's also important to develop relationships with the people you're working with. I've met with some of the cabinet members one-on-one. Just for my reasoning, it was to, really get to know who they are, but also for them to understand what I expect with presentations and information and input going into public meetings. And it's really about, like, I'm one governing board member. Individually, it's nothing. Okay, so my decisions and interests as an individual mean nothing. It has to be the majority collective voice. And that also means that we as a governing board, choose to live by the majority consensus. Trust is built on disagreements and how they're handled in a respectful manner. So whether I vote for or against an issue at the table, I still choose to live by the decision of the group. So those meetings, it's all about trust building and relationship building. So that's a big part of what I see governing board's responsibility is.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So is each board member assigned to an SUSD learning community, and what does that mean, really?
Yes.
This is a really good question. Technically, we are assigned a learning community. We are elected at large, so we represent the district as a whole. We don't represent a specific learning community. My personal view on this, and I don't know how Julie feels, is I don't think it is something that has worked in our district. Historically, I think, for example, when I was, a really good example would be when I was the Arcadia High School and Arcadia Learning Community rep to a year and a half ago, they still went to other board members with their concerns. And what that means is that even if I'm the rep, if they've now brought in 2 board members to discuss the issue and help them, I can't help. And so it doesn't function the way that I think perhaps it was originally intended to function, which is, you're in charge of this community, you will go and tour those schools, you will stay in touch with those principals and those students. And if community members have issues about those schools, they will reach out to you or other board members, but everything would be directed to you. So I don't think it's really worked the way that it was originally intended, and probably never has, just because we are elected at large. And, I might be at Arcadia, but my friends are at Desert Mountain, and so they're going to reach out to me if they have concerns anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think, my personal view, if there was going to be a change, would be to remove it. I think, we are responsible for the whole district. We should be touring all the schools, working with all the principals, working with all of our constituents. But, other people might feel differently. Julie, I'm curious how you feel about that.
It has really kind of pushed me into understanding potentially the needs of a different aspect of our community. I'm very familiar with the Desert Mountain Learning Complex. I live here, I worked here, and Jan's right. People come to me and I say, hey, your representative, your board rep is Libby Hart-Wells, you should really be going to her. I don't tell them they should be going to her, but like, hey, you might want to reach out to her about this as well. I think it's nice because sometimes we're kind of creatures of comfort. And so, I think people have a tendency to try to support their community. But yes, it's the good thing about this is it makes you see you are representing the entire community, whether you're assigned to a complex or not. That was one of the reasons why I felt like it was really important to visit all the campuses, is for the staff members to see that I do care about all of the campuses, whether I've worked there or have friends there or not. So, I think, yeah, it's an interesting practice. We'll just kind of leave it at that. I know our city council talks about that as well, wanting to do these little hubs and representation. But Jan's right. We're hired. Yeah, we're great pay. 0. We are
13.
actually elected to represent everybody in our school district, whether they have kids in the school or not. So, I don't know how effective of a practice it is. And I guess there are some benefits to it, but.
Well,
Yeah,
that's helpful. I think.
Oh, apologies. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it is a good point. And it reminds us to go look at a new learning community and refresh our knowledge of that area, especially if we've done school tours, at the outset of our term, and then are doing kind of refresher tours as we move forward. But insofar as its practical implications for community members, I think that is limited and would require probably a board, a mutual understanding of all board members of how we want to handle that, which we've not had, but it raises a good point, and maybe we should do that.
Add it to the list.
Thank you for clarifying that. It sounds like the bottom line is you do represent a community, but really anyone can reach out to anyone if they need to, or to their rep.
Absolutely.
So that's good to know. So what is your role? So we know that you're involved in the hiring process for the superintendent. What's your role? What's the governing board's role in district staffing? Is there anyone, are there any other positions that you oversee besides the superintendent?
The governing board's job is to govern, and the superintendent's job is to manage. So one of the things that we do in governance is we put in place policies. So for example, when you talk about day-to-day hiring or operations, we evaluate the superintendent, and we may have expectations of day-to-day operations to the superintendent. We can also approve the process for hiring or dismissing school employees, adopting a curriculum and standards for promotion and graduation, establishing the school calendar, which we have done, policies in regards to acquiring, maintaining construction projects, facilities updates, approval of contracts, adopting our budgets, goals, evaluate results of our district, and then we begin again, is pretty much how I understand what our roles are as far as a governing board. So people think that, if they come to us about a personnel issue, that we have the authority to fire an individual. That's not the case. And I think that's a lot of times how people will try to use governing board members to state their issues or complaints about an individual. That's inappropriate to include a governing board member that way. However, we can then bring it to the right party, including HR director, the superintendent, that kind of stuff, or the superintendent, and then he directs it to the HR appropriately. So we kind of have to work as a team with that, but we do not hire. We have a human resources department and they go through the interview process and hire. And if someone violates a policy or breaks a law, then we can be included, we would be included in that information. But Jann?
Yeah, the superintendent is obviously the main one, and we trust him or her or they to review the staff. Their cabinet members in turn should be reviewing their subordinates and so on, and making recommendations to HR about how to proceed with
Right.
hiring or firing people. And we have to trust them to do that. Again, we're not full-time employees. It's a day-to-day thing. In general, we have taken a more direct interest in the in-house counsel or legal counsel. That is a position that is vacant at the moment since Michelle Marshall left to go to ASU and work there. That position is open, but that's one that the governing board would have an active interest in participating in the hiring and firing and interview discussions because of the relevancy of that role to advising the board. We don't have an internal auditor and an internal audit department in our own district. We've just entered into an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Scottsdale to conduct an internal audit for us, but we've not built out that department ourselves. But in that situation, it would be the governing board that directly hired or fired the chief audit executive, again, because that's best practices, and there are certain separations of powers that are needed to make sure that our investigatory side is independent and isn't influenced by the authority of a superintendent or other supervisor. But I think Julie's right. Unless there is a legal, criminal issue or issues warranting independent legal investigation, we probably wouldn't directly involve ourselves in hiring or firing. What we can do, and it has happened at other districts, and it has not worked out well, is because employees have due process rights, they're government employees, the Constitution grants them due process rights for the termination of their employment. We are presented a list of all employees. We do have to formally approve the recommendations to hire or fire individuals or even their resignations. Boards in other districts have in the past voted no on those personnel action items, which essentially halts the entire personnel action process. It can cause quite a lot of concern and tumult, because what you essentially have then are independent board members choosing who to hire and fire. And the reality is while I might not think an employee is particularly good at his or her job, the next board member that comes in might think that that person is great and reverse my decision, and so on. It's never ending. And no doubt Dr. Menzel has heard from many different groups on who's good and bad. And I think back to a meeting I had with a number of Arcadia High School parents, which was fantastic. And we were talking about a teacher who I had. And I said, oh, I love that teacher. And another parent said, oh, that teacher was great. My daughter loved him. And then the other parent said, oh, my daughter hated him. So it's one of those things, right? We just have to trust the process, trust that our superintendent and our cabinet administrators are doing a thorough job vetting our employees' performance.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. There's just a couple questions left. So how can the Scottsdale Parent Council, parents and community members, what's the best way for them to engage with the governing board to communicate? And also, how can they help the governing board meet their goals and responsibilities?
Julie?
Sure. I always have ideas. So I have always valued the work of Scottsdale Parent Council. I know it has been very successful at times, and then it kind of withered away and it's building back up. And I really respect the work that Scottsdale Parent Council is doing. I would like to see Scottsdale Parent Council have representatives on every campus, so that if individuals from a campus, and I believe this is part of the goal of Scottsdale Parent Council, so that if a community or campus has issues or ideas for improvement, that they bring it to the Scottsdale Parent Council. And I have always valued the voice of organizations, especially an organized voice. So whether it's employee voice or it's parent voice, I think or student voice, as a governing board member, I would like to hear, and I believe our governing board as a collective group would like to be brought up to speed on issues that are going on by having reports given out by Scottsdale Parent Council or Student Advisory Council, our Scottsdale Education Association, our School Administrators Association, our support staff administration as well on a regular basis. And I think that organized structure of representatives helps to bring the collective effort of Scottsdale Parent Council, for example, together in designing their goals and vision and mission, and really empowers Scottsdale Parent Council as being more organized and having a more united voice, even if it's very disjointed. So I would like for Scottsdale Parent Council to continue to pursue reaching out and having those representatives on each of the campuses. I think that just helps to organize the communication process. Because if I'm hearing bits and pieces from individuals, I may think they're just very isolated issues. But if it's coming together as a collective concern, that might be something for us then as a governing board to develop an action around that need. So I think that Scottsdale Parent Council can be a great partner in making our district a better place for in our community. So that's what I would like to really propose, is that Scottsdale Parent Council utilize the site reps. And you guys did such great education, have had such great education opportunities for parents too. I know it's a little bit tricky with COVID, but gosh, I'd really like to continue to help with those opportunities in our community for parents as well. I think it's vital. Another thing that you guys can do is to engage, watch the meetings, participate when given the opportunity, advocate at our state capitol, include us in invitations with things that are going on in the community, at the schools, support SUSD in social media posts. We can be our biggest fans and we can be our biggest, anchors by our word of mouth and what we share. Support our district, brag about things that are going on out in our community and on your campuses by sending letters to the editor, sharing information with other communities. That those bragging points, that's the difference. Right now we are, communication's a challenge, and we're looking to put someone in place for our not our social media, our marketing and our information leader. But in the meantime, we're relying on things just to stay afloat. Yet I open up our local newspaper and I see all sorts of articles about kids from other schools other than Scottsdale schools, and I see advertisements. And that's something that I would love for us to work better on as a community, is sharing our good stories about the great stuff going on in our classrooms and on our campuses.
Yeah, I think Julie has a great idea there, and that is, finding ways to funnel individual concerns through the SPC and their site reps to us. We are the government. People can email us at any time, but I would agree with Julie that we receive a lot of one-off emails, and it's really difficult to know whether it's a significant concern, whether other people have experienced the same thing. And I think SPC could certainly serve as a conduit for those issues. And the good things, I think the other thing that's important to remember, and we forget, is the SPC has these great working groups, and the governing board has these great working groups. And there's so many issues and challenges that we're trying to tackle and fix that we often forget about the really great things that are happening at our district, the things that are the selling points to other families that are deciding between our district and either, another district or charter schools or private schools. I have to say, I did go to private school, for elementary through middle school. And I had great teachers, but, touring our schools, meeting with our teachers now, seeing the campuses we have, seeing all the opportunities available to students, the cool CTE programs, the IB, this, that, and the other, there's not a chance, and my parents have been along with me on the ride here, looking at these things. There's not a chance that I would make that decision for my own kids. I mean, the public schools at SUSD are just top notch, and the programs available to them far exceed anything that was available to me. We really are. I said earlier that Dr. Menzel will hopefully bring us into the 21st century and beyond. In many ways, we're already there. We just don't tell anybody about it. So,
Right.
And we spend so much time trying to fix the problems, which is a really important thing to do. It is our job, but there is just a lot of great stuff going on. So marketing that is a good thing.
Right. And everyone that's part of Scottsdale Parent Council, I see you guys as partners, and we can all be advocates for Scottsdale Unified School District. So, I think we need to be more intentional about sharing the messages, the good experiences that your kids have. I think sometimes it's really easy to just focus on an issue and a challenge, whether it's a personal challenge or an academic challenge or an opportunity challenge. What if we converted some of that energy into, instead of looking at the challenges, looking at the possibilities that we have collectively as individuals? We don't have as much power to be effective as individuals. We work really hard to fix our own problems. But when we can do it collectively, maybe I can borrow something that Emmy practiced, some skill or strategy that she's put in place, and maybe that's going to help me. And I didn't know that other than when I reached out to Emmy as an example. So, I think we're much more alike than different. And I would like for us as a district to see that. Of course, there are things that we need to improve upon. I have some very important things that are near and dear to me as a human being on what I want our school district to become. But I wouldn't be here if I didn't value our school district to begin with. I'd either still be teaching because I love working with my students and my colleagues, or I would be doing some other job. And I'm choosing to do this because I care so much about Scottsdale schools, and I'm so committed to the vision that everyone here has for our school district. I think we just need to be better at organizing what we want and coming up with solutions. And sometimes we just spin our own wheels.
That is really good feedback and much appreciated. We just had a similar discussion in our SPC council meeting about highlighting what are this has been a tough year, tougher than most.
Yeah.
And what can we do to highlight some of the good stuff, kind of that good news movement kind of thing. So much appreciated. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, and I apologize for this. Julie also brought this up, and it's an important thing that might have been missed. But at the board retreat in January, we had a lengthy discussion about who we wanted to see at our meetings on a routine basis now, and what opportunities we wanted to provide. We have the student advisory board that we try to hear back from on a pretty regular basis. They were supposed to present on Tuesday, but couldn't. There was an issue there. And that's great. Hearing from our students is really important, even when they vote not to return to school and we have to deal with the differences of opinion there. But it's really important that our students speak to us. It's also important that we hear back from our various associations, as Julie said, and from the SPC. So part of that discussion was actually providing on a pretty routine basis, at least once a quarter, the SPC the opportunity, the exec board, to come and speak, update us on the work, see where we can help out, see what has been done, and hopefully foster that relationship and kind of not make it more official, but provide that outlet so that we are up to date, up to speed, and we know where we can help out.
And beyond the 3-minute comment opportunity. So to actually give a presentation on, what's going on. And I think that's really important, because delivering anything of real importance, it can't just be complaints, because I've always felt like if there's an issue, you bring forth the issue, but you also bring forth ideas and opportunities to provide remedy to the issue. So it's not just about griping, but it's about fixing and improving. And that makes every single one of us and our campuses and our kids and our staff members so much better off if we're coming forward with opportunities. And I would love to hear ideas. I know that there are some great, smart people in our community that have unlimited ideas on how to improve things. I would love to hear those and start or continue to work on those.
It all sounds like a great plan, and definitely Scottsdale Parent Council is happy to be as involved as we can.
Super.
That's all the questions I have. I don't think anything came up in the chat. Again, we really appreciate you being here, and thank you very much.
Anytime.
Yes.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having
Thank you,
us.
Julie and Jann-Michael, and thank you, Holly, for leading our discussion tonight. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. This will be recorded and available on our YouTube site to spread the word. This was fantastic, lots of good information. So spread the word for other parents to watch it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.